Hey everybody, I'm William Green. Welcome to another chat between me and Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis. And today we're going to be talking about Cattleya seedling culture because, well, Steve, you got some, I've got some,
I
and
I bet a lot of our viewers have some.
you think so?
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. A lot of the people I talk to end up saying, "Hey, where should I get that X species?" And I say, "Well, you should go here." And then they end up getting, a little seedling like this or smaller, and then they kill it and they wonder what happened.
It's true. It's definitely the most economical way to go. I, I think that getting adult plants, especially some of the more difficult to find species, you can be looking at 60, 70, maybe even $100 plants or more.
Hundreds, yeah,
Um,
for
but I
sure.
mean, I guess the trade-off is, Cattleya seedlings, they take a long time to get to that blooming point.
Yeah, I guess it depends on, are you more interested? Is time a bigger factor for you, or is money a bigger factor for you? And for me, it's money, and I suspect that your interest in seedlings means that it's money for you as well.
Well,
Um,
also, I think it's money, but also like in the long run, if you're successful, you end up with a bunch of adult plants that are worth money. So
yeah,
it's almost like an investment.
it really can be, especially if you're buying from a reputable breeder, and the parents are probably going to be pretty good, and so you invest in a whole bunch of little babies, or maybe just one or two, and then it turns out to be this absolutely amazing seedling that could, uh, at the very least, maybe you could sell a division for and recoup the money that you got, or make a little money, or trade for something cool.
Sure. You'll
So
definitely get the money back out of it that you spent on the flask or on the compost or whatever. So
yeah,
yeah, so I guess the pros of the seedlings is, one, you get lots of years of experience growing whatever you're growing. So by the time it blooms, the chances of you messing it up are pretty slim at that point, hopefully.
yeah,
You get lots of plants that you can use to trade or sell later. Um, so yeah, and it's more cost effective. You kind of can make some money off of it in the future.
yeah, and it can be a lot of fun. Especially if it's not a clone, right? If it's something that's brand new, maybe you get some really cool color, or even it's just the regular color and it's still amazing. The
Yeah, it could be
first
something no one
blooms
else
of,
has.
yeah, exactly. And then the first bloom that you get is just super cool. Most of the time you're super excited, and even if it's dog ugly, you're still pretty excited.
Right, sure. 6, 7 years after the fact, you're just happy that the thing is blooming.
Yeah,
Well, let's talk a little bit. Shall we talk about kind of general culture first, and then get into the seedlings that we have?
yeah, for sure. Um,
We could kind of start out with maybe just like, so for example, light. Generally speaking, Cattleya species like a lot of light, but what about the seedlings?
So there's kind of two trains of thought. If you're going to err on the side of caution, I would go a little less light than your adults. Um, but I grow mine alongside my adults, and they seem to do just fine.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree. Yeah, they tend to be, they can be as tough as the adults. They're just a little bit more sensitive to maybe changes and that kind of stuff. But
yeah, and when we show the examples, I say that they can take as much light as their adult cohorts, but I'm going to show you a whole bunch of burnt seedlings today. So
you're
I
gonna
didn't
show
realize that
some
I'm
fried
looking at
ones.
a bunch of burnt ones. So yeah, so we'll kind of look at that as well. And um, the nice thing about seedlings is if you do burn them, um, they're going to dump those leaves soon anyway. Because
Right.
because they typically, if they're doing well, they're growing so fast that those old burnt leaves are gone in a year, maybe. And you can forget that you burnt them.
Right.
Um, but if you're under lights, you can definitely blast them with as much light as you want. Certainly as much as the adults. The sun can be brutal, especially here in Texas.
Oh, sure.
And same anywhere really. If it's bright, it's hot. You can scorch the leaves. So you want to know how much sun is hitting them and how often, and like you said earlier, how is that changing throughout the day and throughout the seasons.
Right.
If you're just using the shade of a tree, for example, to keep the sun off.
And also talking about water, I think a lot of people I know that I got the advice when I started growing seedlings that they need a little bit more water than an adult Cattleya. And I think a lot of people will pot their seedlings in something like sphagnum right off the bat to help them get that.
Yeah, they'll still want to dry out, um, but they're going to be more sensitive to desiccation. So let's say your adults get watered once or twice a week. Maybe your little guys, and I'll show a little pot here. This is going to dry out faster just because it's in a smaller pot.
Sure.
And so you have to worry about that. Plus the fact that these guys are so small, they don't have the pseudobulbs, which are designed to sort of provide a little extra
They don't have the
moisture
water
and
storage
nutrients.
organs.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't have that. So you can kill them a lot more quickly than an adult if you don't water appropriately. And that goes if it's too wet as well.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I made at first when I started growing seedlings was I had everything in sphagnum and the sphagnum was just soaking wet all the time. And, luckily they still survived. But I could tell that the roots were just really like, they wanted to reach out and grow and they would kind of hit that stuff. And then they just have this watery look to them. And then they just didn't have that robust, root growth that you want to see. So
Yeah.
now I've got my second group of seedlings here. I'll show you in a second. I've got them in sphagnum, but I'm letting the sphagnum just barely stay moist. I'm kind of giving them a little sprinkle every day, but it's not wet. So it might even still be too wet, but I'm getting better. I do have a tendency to overwater.
Yeah, and actually, if you're going to use sphagnum, a good way to get around that is, so I kind of go back and forth between whether I want to put my seedlings in a fine grade bark or sphagnum, and it really depends on my mood that day, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
But like these guys, they have sphagnum, but it's only like this deep, you know, so it can dry out pretty quickly. Underneath, I have, big, it's in a clay pot, so it breathes, but I have eco web underneath. So it's this sort
Oh,
of
okay.
inorganic media that's lots of air. And then on top is a thin layer of sphagnum. And I find that to be just as good as the fine grade bark.
Okay. As long as you get that air traveling around underneath.
Mhm. Yeah. In that way, it can dry out. If you're like, oh crap, I'm just watering too much, when it's this thin, it'll dry out quicker than if it's this wad, right?
Right. All right. Well, heck, I'm getting impatient. Let's see what we got. Let's see what kind of seedlings we got here. Should I
Sure.
start? Maybe you want to go back and forth or
Yeah, well, what I can do is I can do a parade or a succession of seedlings as they get
okay.
bigger and bigger.
Okay.
So let's start with yours.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's see. Where shall I start? I'm going to start. So these are Cattleya Rex seedlings right here.
Awesome.
I've got them in a plastic pot. I've got just about this much sphagnum in the bottom of the pot. It's like I said, it's got moisture there, but it's not wet by any means. And these seedlings all were shipped to me about a month ago, and the temperatures that week were in the teens Fahrenheit. So super, super, super cold. When I got the plants, I thought they were all going to be dead,
Well
but
below
they were
freezing.
pretty well packed and they survived. So
Huh.
this is one group of little Rexes, and I've noticed that there is some new growth. Now, some of them did die, of course, but there's some new growth pushing out, and yeah, I got them under the light, and I can start to see some kind of purplish coloring on the leaves there, and it looks like they should be okay. Their
So did they
leaves are
come to
nice and
you?
firm.
Were they a community pot or were they a flask?
They were in a flask, so
Okay.
I deflasked them, washed off all the agar, and then just packed them in just two little pots with sphagnum.
Very cool. And those look like pretty big seedlings. Those are
Yeah,
really
right.
nice.
So these actually came from the same vendor that you were talking about that was sending you really premature stuff.
Oh, interesting.
And this person actually was like, well, that's too small. So he actually replated them for another year.
Okay.
So these were replated when I got them.
Huh.
Okay, second group is this is a milk, what a yogurt container I cut the top off of. And these are Cattleya Aurea, the golden variety.
Very cool.
Um, I these, they came out of the flask. Really, the leaves were very kind of papery,
Mm.
very delicate, very sensitive. And man, they have hardened up. Like they are hard now.
Yeah.
And I thought that these would be the ones that would definitely be dead after the post office shipment was delayed and it was freezing cold. So we were talking 9 days in a dark, cold box, and they came out, and I have 3 of these. So there's a ton of them. They're starting to put out little tiny little green root tips, and yeah, I'm really stoked about these guys.
That's cool. Yeah.
I'm a little concerned. I mean, I don't know. Like I hear that this species is really sensitive to moisture, so I'm trying to keep them good and dry, with maybe some daily sprinkles, and we'll just see how it goes. So far, so good.
I doubt Dowiana is going to be any more persnickety than Rex. In
Really,
fact, I bet they're probably going to be about the same. So uh, just treat it like you would with the other ones. I think you'll do all right.
so you think they'll be okay? All right, great
Yeah.
deal. All right, now these dudes. This is Cattleya blosfeldiana, which is a natural hybrid of Cattleya rex and Cattleya luteola.
Hmm.
And so these are supposed to look, when they bloom, they're supposed to look like kind of like miniature little rexes. Cattleya luteola flowers are only about this big across, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm stoked about these two because one, it's a natural hybrid, so I'm not deviating from my species thing. It's something that could actually happen in nature. There's a ton of them in there. The roots, there were so many roots I couldn't get them all in the pot. New growth pushing out. Again, it's in, this one's kind of like your pot you just showed with the eco web. I've got about this much of granite rock in the bottom, and then the sphagnum layer up here.
Yeah.
And again, just checking them daily that they're not like soaking wet or anything like that. You can see some of the leaves have turned black. Some of the leaf tips have turned black, but for the most part, it looks like they've kind of stabilized. A lot of people, when you get your seedlings out of a flask, they want to put them in vitro in an incubator, just high humidity. You're afraid of something bad happening to them. And I was just like, screw it, guys. I'm just going to put them out there. And if you don't like it, tough. So yeah, they toughened up real quick.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
That's more gutsy than I am for sure.
Yeah, no, because I mean, honestly, like the fact that I grew Cattleya Rex from flaskling to bloom, and I abused those poor things so badly that I just felt confident that like they can take a lot more than you think you can take. I mean, I literally, took seedlings smaller than that, like this big little seedlings, and glued them to a piece of bark. 9 years, 7 years, 6, 7 years later, they're blooming.
I do
So they're
remember that
tough.
post on Orchid Board.
Oh yeah. And so I just wanted to show you, this is one of those seedlings from 2014.
Huh.
So it is this big.
And so its big brothers and sisters are blooming.
Are blooming. Yeah.
Okay.
So just to give you an idea of, another thing, when you get a flask of seedlings, you could get some that grow really fast and bloom great, and then you could get others that maybe one day when I'm 60 years old, this thing will bloom. Who knows? But
So
I don't.
are you gonna
I really like it.
Are you gonna keep it? I was gonna say, are you gonna keep it or are you gonna toss it?
I'm totally gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep all the little. I think there's about 4 of them that are this size, and I don't know. I'm curious. They might not end up being anything special at all, or they might end up being like tetraploid, huge flowers, interesting. I have no idea, but I just want to see.
So, that kind of brings up another point. I think we've talked about is Roy Tokunaga over at H&R Orchids. He's the R of H&R. And he has a really interesting lecture. I think if you go to YouTube and it's on Odom's Orchids is the channel, and then you go, they post their Cattleya Symposium lectures, and
Yeah,
he
they've got some
has
amazing Cattleya Symposium videos.
really great lectures, really great lectures, really great lecturers, just a really great resource for sure. And I think in that talk, or maybe when I saw him another talk, but anyway, he talks about, keeping some of those small ones, because they might be polyploid, and he's talking about cattleyas, and that they could have, extra chromosomes. For those who aren't aware of what polyploid is versus diploid,
Right,
diploid has two sets of chromosomes, which is like you and me, and then a polyploid plant can have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8
right.
sets of chromosomes, and those extra chromosomes can reduce the rate of growth, and B, make gigantic, cool-looking flowers.
Yeah, you have a polyploid amethystiglosta, don't you?
Yes, yeah,
And it's
from
like
Roy actually.
it's
Yeah,
humongous.
yeah, they're giant, and you can tell anecdotally, you can tell the difference between them and their diploid cousins by the plants, and the flowers are larger, but also because typically the leaves are like hard plastic,
Thicker. Yeah.
thicker. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, see? Yeah, and I don't know, like these little guys, like there's another one that I don't have with me right now, but it's about this size, but the leaves are this wide,
Hmm.
and they're really thick, and I'm like, maybe you got something going on there. So
Yeah,
yeah, it'll be interesting. If I could get some really massive, thick substance Cattleya Rex flowers, I'll be a happy camper.
it'll be worth those 3 decades of growing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool.
All right, show
Um,
us what you got, man.
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna do kind of, another succession. So I had this video that I did an update last week of these. This is Cattleya hardiana, of this group of seedlings that was sent to me. Way too small, way too small, way too small. And maybe you can see through the plastic here. And so these, if I got a flask of these, I probably still wouldn't want to pull them out. They'd still be too small. But I've got them growing in here. This was an incubator because I still had to have flask conditions for 6 months, and so I got the holes in the bottom, and so there was a water well in here and inorganic media, and then wood on top just to keep the humidity crazy high. I don't do that anymore. They're kind of growing more normally. And then last week, I guess you and I were both busy getting plants in the mail or potting. So this is Cattleya triumphans. I got a community pot, not a flask. And of course, triumphans is Rex by Doiana, right? And
Yeah.
these are 4N. And so these are the smallest ones. So when you get a flask or a community pot, the range and sizes of these guys can be huge. So what I like to do is I'll individually pot all the large plants, like this one. This is triumphans right here. This is one of the larger ones.
Oh, nice. Now, do you think because they're 4Ns that they're going to be a little slower?
I am curious to see if that's true. The leaves are way thicker than what I am used to. So
Okay.
I think they're
Because maybe that
colchicine treated.
hybrid vigor and the polyploidy will kind of balance itself out.
I hope so. They seem to be growing pretty nicely for me. I don't see any slowness. I haven't had them that long. I got them a little longer than a week ago, but and then for the smallest ones, I'll just throw in a community pot like this and spag them and let them grow. And if they die, they die. Who cares? I've got the big ones still. But if they live, you can have a whole community pot like this.
Right. And it's also, I just wanted to mention right now, show us that community pot again.
Yeah.
People who are starting out with Cattleya seedlings don't look like Cattleyas at all. Like they look like Phalaenopsis. They grow like monopodial Phalaenopsis leaves. And you might ask yourself, wait a minute, did I get the right thing?
Yeah.
They don't look like adult Cattleyas. It's not until like the 3rd or 4th year you start to get those pseudobulbs pushing out.
And these were the smallest ones. My bigger ones are closer to this size.
Yeah.
So this is General Powell. This is Labiata Cerulea by Ludemaniana Cerulea.
Oh, that'll be nice.
these are going to be great. Both parents are awarded. A friend of mine made this cross, and she is one of the best Cattleya breeders and growers I know. So those will be cool. And this is another H&R. This is Vixia Cerulea. I got a community pot of these guys about a year ago.
Look at that.
And look at the sunburn.
Oh no. That's okay. That new growth looks great.
Yeah, so not burnt, and these leaves will fall off in a year. And this guy will walk out of its pot probably on the next growth.
Yeah.
And so I'll just throw it in a larger pot, and away we go.
You got me drooling. I'm gonna wipe my mouth.
I suspect you and I are gonna have to do some trades here in the next couple of years because I was looking at yours with some envy.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about seedlings is you get that. You get the number of plants, you get the experience growing them, and then, one day you're going to have way too many and you have something to do with them. I did want to talk about, too, a little bit about the importance of record keeping, because I have referred to my photos and my notes of my seedlings from 6 years ago so many times, and I wish I had taken more photos and been more methodical about it, about like, when you have this many plants in a pot, you're not going to go through and be like, this is number 1, this is number 2. But once they start getting into their individual pots, I really wish that I had kept track of them, because some of them are faster growers. Some of them have bigger leaves. Some of them seem to put out more roots, and to me, all those little details are important. When I decided I was going to breed my Rexes, I mean, obviously the first choice was what were the fastest growers? The first 2 to bloom, those 2 got crossed,
Yeah.
Hopefully that's going to mean that next generation will be just a little bit faster,
Yeah, and as your collection gets bigger and bigger, so maybe if you have a small collection, maybe you can keep notes mentally of each individual one, but once you get to the size, a certain size of collection, you'll pot them and you throw them in the corner with all the other ones that are the same age, and you lose track.
Sure.
And so yeah, I think record keeping is a good idea. At the very, very least, keep a name tag in every single pot. So I just buy these name tags. I have a little label maker.
Oh, nice.
That I print out. I print the name, and then on the back it says -H&R. So I print the name of the vendor that I got it from. And I've also found it useful to keep track of who. So let's say I get this little guy from H&R bred it, but I bought it from you. So then I'll put on the back, I'll say William Green, so that I can keep better track of who's giving me what and where I'm getting plants from, and it's just a part of that kind of record keeping, I think. And keep it simple. In my opinion, I like to keep it simple. And that's one of the main ways that I do it, is just those little label notes that kind of follow the plant through its life.
Gosh, if something happened to me, I would hope that someone would have to go back through my YouTube videos to see what everything was, because my plants have no labels.
Yeah.
Well, if we were going to give some advice to somebody who was thinking about buying a flask, they eyeing that flask on eBay and they really want to get it, what do you think would be some good pointers?
Do it, and don't worry about killing them.
Right.
So maybe if it's your first flask, maybe you don't buy the $150 flask. Maybe you buy the $50 or $60 flask, with the understanding that you might get one plant out of it, or you get them all. Just there's a good chance that you won't do well, but there's a chance that you will do well. So
yeah, I would say it's about conditions. If you have conditions that other orchids seem to be thriving in, especially if we're talking about Cattleyas, your Cattleyas seem to be thriving in, or at least doing pretty well and blooming every year and not getting smaller and all that good stuff, your seedlings should be able to live there. I mean, they should be able to live in that. Like I said, you can stick a seedling on a piece of wood and mist it every day, and it can live,
That's funny. I like that. That's great.
I was thinking about doing that with some of these, actually, just grabbing some, I can just grab a piece of, tree branch or something like that, and glue a few on it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to experiment, because hey, let's say you do an experiment and it turns out that, hey, maybe gluing these guys to tree branches, they grow way faster than the ones that I had in sphagnum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a heavy water, or you live in Miami where it's just wet and drippy all the time, you know.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think experiment, you know, when you have a whole bunch of plants, sacrifice a few.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're gonna lose some. I mean, you're just gonna lose some, but
Yeah.
but only the strong survive,
Yeah, that's right.
which is better for you in the long run, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, in terms of seedlings, I think it's just a matter of doing it. Same with the other plants. I feel like a lot of the folks watching this, maybe they started buying adults from, you know, maybe Home Depot or their local grocery store, and then they started getting smaller as they were refining their tastes, and maybe they're, you know, they're buying 2-inch pots, and then they're growing those out just fine. Maybe, you know, maybe the next step is a community pot that you buy from H&R, or one of these other vendors selling community pots. Maybe your next step after that is flasking, or maybe you just jump right into flasking
Mm,
and you buy a flask from whomever online,
right.
and you start playing with it. It's a lot of fun.
One last thing I want to talk about, which we haven't talked about yet, was fertilizer. I did not really apply very much fertilizer at all to my seedlings, and they grew very slowly. Leaves were kind of yellow, and then as you know, I kept my collection in a commercial greenhouse for about, was it 2 years or so?
Yeah.
And they experienced phenomenal growth in
Mhm.
that greenhouse, and I attribute it to the heavy fertilizer that they use, because that's what they do. They buy plug trays of seedlings and they want to grow them up as fast as they can. So I now have a much, I've read documents and articles that say, well, Cattleyas don't really need fertilizer. Have you ever seen this? You've seen this
Uh,
stuff, right?
I have, you know, one of my really good buddies who's a great Cattleya grower for a long time wouldn't fertilize them. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he's come around and he
Yeah,
fertilizes them.
I'm sold on it. I saw such a tremendous difference.
Yeah.
That yeah, I fertilize every time I water. I use a teeny tiny amount. Like right now in the winter, we're talking like 10 to 15 parts per million of nitrogen in my
Yeah.
water. But almost, I'd say every watering, 3 out of 5 waterings has got fertilizer in it for me.
Yeah, you know, for the small seedlings, they are easy to burn, especially if you're using sphagnum. Sphagnum will hold those salts a little longer. Clay pots will hold those salts a little longer, so keep that in mind when you're dosing.
Yeah, if you
For
see green
me,
algae all over your sphagnum, that's also an indication, right?
the green slimy algae on top of your sphagnum actually means that the pH is decreasing, and you can fix that
Oh,
with a little bit of dolomite, and just sprinkle the top with dolomite, and that'll fix that. Actually, Roy at H&R told me that years ago, as that was his little remedy for that. Um, I start fertilizing about a month after I get them out of flask. So once they've hardened off to the point where you don't have to have a lid on them, or like you, that's the
just
next
throw
day.
them out there.
Yeah, yeah. I think you can start fertilizing very, very dilute. I like to I have that purely organic. I just sprinkle some powder on, and that's good for a couple months. You know, I don't have like a dedicated fertilizer regimen until they get big enough to be an individual pot, and then I'll add slow release fertilizer. But when they're in the sort of community pots, like I said, I'll just sprinkle a little bit, and then, you know, come back a couple months later and sprinkle a little bit, and that's it. You know, you don't need much. You do need some, I think,
Right.
like you're talking about, but not a whole lot.
It definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, for those of you guys who are watching, if you have any questions about seedlings or just need some encouragement, feel free to leave a comment on me or Steven's channel, and we are dedicated enablers, and we will definitely push you to give it a shot.
Absolutely, yes. And like I said, don't be afraid to take the plunge. And if your plants die, just buy more.
All right. All right. Well, Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, pleasure as usual.
Good to chat with you, and I'm glad you reached out and said, hey, we should do this. And This was a good chat as always, and a good
Sure.
topic, I
Yeah.
think.
Maybe we can do every 6 month, something like that. Little seedling update just to
Yeah,
see how they're doing.
that sounds like a pretty good idea for sure. And
All right. Cool.
happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there who is in the United States and celebrates and is hopefully having a fun and safe week or a couple days off, maybe.
All right. Hope everybody gets their fill of whatever your favorite Thanksgiving foods are.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys later. Thanks a lot.